The billionaire's daughter had been in a coma for 3 years, until the old maid did the unexpected, the silence. The rain hammered relentlessly against the reinforced glass of the penthouse suite, a rhythmic drumming that mocked the silence inside. In the center of the room, surrounded by machines that hummed and clicked with terrifying precision, lay Lily. She looked like a porcelain doll that had been discarded, her skin translucent, her small chest rising and falling only because a ventilator forced it to. Julian Thorne stood by the window, his reflection ghostly in the glass. At 35, he possessed the kind of handsome features that magazines fawned over: sharp jawline, piercing grey eyes, an expensive tailored suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. But the man in the reflection was hollow. His eyes were red-rimmed, devoid of the fire that had built his billion-dollar tech empire. "Mr. Thorne," Dr. Evans said softly, his voice grating against the stillness. The doctor stood by the monitors, clipboard in hand, his expression practiced in its sympathy. "We need to discuss the timeline again. It's been 3 years. The brain activity has plateaued. In fact, it's deteriorating. Keeping her on these machines, it's prolonging the inevitable." Julian didn't turn around. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, though he hadn't taken a sip in an hour. "You want me to kill my daughter, Doctor?" "I want you to let her rest," Evans corrected gently. "She isn't there anymore, Julian. What's lying in that bed is a shell. We've tried every specialist in Europe, every experimental treatment in the States. There is nothing left to do." "There is always something," Julian whispered, though his voice cracked. He felt the weight of the world crushing his chest. 3 years ago, the car accident had taken his wife instantly and left his vibrant, laughing 3-year-old in this purgatory. He had spent millions turning this wing of his mansion into a state-of-the-art ICU, refusing to put her in a hospice. But money couldn't buy life. "I'll give you the night to think about the paperwork," Dr. Evans said, sensing the wall Julian had put up. "I'll check on her vitals in the morning." As the doctor left, the heavy oak doors clicked shut. Julian walked to the bedside. He looked down at Lily. She was 6 now, but she looked so small. Her blonde hair was thin, lacking the luster it once had. He reached out to touch her hand, but pulled back. He was terrified that his touch would convey his despair, that somehow she would feel his desire to give up. "I'm sorry, baby," he choked out, turning away. He couldn't breathe in there. He needed air. He stormed out of the medical suite, passing the head of his household staff in the hallway. "Sir," Mrs. Higgins said, startled, "the new cleaning girl is here, for the medical wing. You asked for someone thorough." Julian waved a hand dismissively. "I don't care. Just make sure she doesn't disturb anything. If she unplugs a single wire, she's fired. No, she's sued. Is that clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." Julian retreated to his study to drown his sorrows, leaving the door to the medical suite unguarded for the first time in months. Enter Clara. She was 25, but her eyes held the depth of someone who had lived 100 lifetimes. She was strikingly beautiful, with cascading dark hair tied back in a practical bun. Those stray tendrils framed a face that seemed carved from memory. Soft, compassionate, and undeniably sad. She wore the standard uniform Mrs. Higgins had given her, a crisp navy blue dress with a white apron and, crucially, thick yellow rubber gloves that reached her elbows. She had been briefed strictly. "Go in. Sanitize the floors, dust the equipment. Do not look at the child, do not touch the child. Leave." Clara pushed the cart into the dim room. The smell hit her first: antiseptic, recycled air, and the underlying scent of fading life. She paused, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wasn't just a maid. She was a woman running from a past that had shattered her, and this job was her hiding place. She began to mop, the rhythmic swish of the water blending with the steady beep. Beep. Beep of the heart monitor. But her eyes kept drifting to the bed. The little girl looked so lonely. Clara stopped mopping. She leaned on the handle, biting her lip. The instructions were explicit. But looking at Lily, Clara felt a familiar ache in her womb, a phantom pain of a loss she never spoke about. She looked up at the corner of the room. She knew there were cameras. Julian Thorne was a paranoid man. Everyone said so. But the room felt so cold, so sterile. It lacked humanity. "You're not just a shell," Clara whispered into the silence. Her voice was melodic, husky with suppressed emotion. She abandoned the mop. Slowly, moving as if in a trance, she approached the bed. She shouldn't do this. She needed this paycheck. She needed to eat. But the pull was magnetic. Clara stood over Lily. Up close, the damage was visible, the pallor, the fragility. The oxygen tube taped to her nose looked harsh against her soft skin. "They treat you like a machine," Clara said softly. "But I see you." She reached into her apron pocket. It wasn't allowed, but she had brought it anyway. A small jar of organic lavender balm, something she used to make with her grandmother. It wasn't medicine. It was just comfort. She looked at the camera lens, a black eye in the corner of the ceiling. For a second, she hesitated. Then defiance flashed in her eyes. "Let him fire me," she thought. "No one should die without being touched with love." Clara pulled up the heavy hospital blanket, exposing Lily's small, pale feet. They were cold as ice. "Shh," Clara hummed. It was a lullaby, but not a common one. It was an old folk tune, deep and resonant, vibrating in her chest. She scooped a small amount of the balm onto her yellow-gloved finger. She began to rub it into the soles of the child's feet. She didn't use the clinical, efficient motions of the nurses who came to check stats. She used slow, circular, loving movements. She massaged the cold toes, the arch of the foot, trying to push warmth back into the stagnant blood. And she sang, "Sleep, little star, the night is long, but the morning brings the golden song." In his study, Julian was staring at the wall of monitors that displayed every room in the house. He had been ignoring them, staring into his drink, until movement on the screen caught his eye. The medical suite. The new maid. He squinted, setting his glass down hard on the mahogany desk. What was she doing? She wasn't mopping. She was bending over the bed, panic cold and sharp, spiked in his veins. He saw her hands on Lily. He saw her touching the child. "What the hell?" Julian hissed. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "She's touching her. She's touching the IVs." His mind immediately jumped to the worst conclusion: sabotage, kidnapping, or simply incompetence that could dislodge a life-saving tube. "Don't you dare!" he growled at the screen. He saw Clara close her eyes, her head moving as if she was speaking or singing. It looked ritualistic. It looked wrong. Julian didn't wait. He sprinted out of the study, the expensive rug slipping under his shoes. He ran down the long hallway, his heart pounding in his ears, fueled by a mixture of protective rage and the guilt he had been harboring all night. He was going to throw her out. He was going to destroy her for daring to disturb his daughter's final peace. Inside the room, Clara didn't hear the footsteps thundering down the hall. She was lost in the connection. As she rubbed the balm into Lily's feet, she felt a strange sensation, a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch in the girl's big toe. Clara froze. She looked at Lily's face. The eyelids fluttered, just once. "That's it," Clara whispered, tears springing to her eyes. "Come back. Follow the voice." The door burst open with a crash that shook the walls. Part 2. The confrontation. "Get your hands off her!" The roar filled the room, shattering the peaceful atmosphere Clara had created. Julian stood in the doorway, chest heaving, his face twisted in a mask of fury. He looked like a demon in a suit, his eyes wild. Clara jumped back, gasping. The jar of balm slipped from her gloved fingers and rolled across the sterile floor, the sound echoing sharply. She instinctively raised her hands in surrender, the yellow gloves stark against the air. Sir, I was just—" Clara stammered, her heart leaping into her throat. Julian didn't let her finish. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, grabbing Clara by her upper arm. His grip was iron. "I gave specific instructions. No touching. Are you deaf or just stupid? You could have killed her." "I wasn't hurting her," Clara cried out, wincing at the pain in her arm but refusing to look away. Her eyes locked with his, and for a second Julian was taken aback by the sheer intensity of her gaze. It wasn't fear he saw there, it was defiance. "I was warming her. She was freezing. Can't you feel it? The room is an icebox." "You are a maid," Julian shouted, shaking her slightly. "You clean the floor. You don't touch the patient. You have no idea what condition she is in. Get out of my house before I call the police for assault." He shoved her towards the door. Clara stumbled, catching herself on the doorframe. She looked back at him, tears of frustration welling up. "She isn't a patient. She's a little girl. She needs to know someone is there." "She knows nothing! She is brain dead!" Julian screamed, the words tearing out of his throat, the admission he had refused to make to the doctor finally exploding out of him. "She is gone, and I don't need some cleaning girl making a mockery of her body." "She isn't gone," Clara shouted back. Suddenly a sound cut through the screaming match. Beep, beep, beep. It was the heart monitor. But the rhythm had changed. It was no longer the slow, dragging drone of a machine keeping a body alive. It was faster, stronger. Beep, 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 beep. Julian froze. The anger drained from his face, replaced by confusion. He turned slowly towards the machines. The green line on the monitor was spiking higher than he had seen in 3 years. "What did you do?" he whispered, horror washing over him. "You sent her into shock." "No," Clara said, her voice trembling. She took a step back into the room, despite his command to leave. "Look at the oxygen saturation. Look at it." Julian looked. The numbers were climbing. 96%, 97%, 98%, and then the impossible happened. A low, guttural sound came from the bed. It wasn't the hiss of the ventilator, it was a vocal cord engaging, a cough. Julian's knees buckled. He grabbed the bed rail to support himself. "Lily!" He stared at his daughter. The girl's face was scrunching up, a grimace of discomfort. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. The smooth, expressionless mask of the coma was breaking. "Doctor!" Julian roared, turning to the hallway, but then realized he was alone with the maid. He looked back at Clara. "What did you put on her? What was in that jar?" He lunged for the small pot on the floor. He unscrewed it, sniffing it suspiciously. "Lavender? Grease? Is this some kind of poison?" "It's just balm," Clara said, her voice steadying. She walked past him, emboldened by the change in the child. She stood on the other side of the bed. "And I sang to her." "You sang?" Julian looked at her like she was insane. "My daughter is waking up because you sang?" "Because I touched her," Clara corrected. "She's been lost in the dark, sir. She needed a hand to hold on to." Suddenly, the alarms blared. Not the critical failure alarms, but the patient conscious alert that Dr. Evans had set up years ago, an alarm Julian had never expected to hear. Nurses and Dr. Evans rushed into the room moments later, a flurry of white coats and panic. "Stabilize the head! Check the pupils!" Evans barked, pushing Julian aside. He shone a penlight into Lily's eyes. Julian stood back, breathing heavily. He watched the medical team swarm his daughter. He felt useless. He felt terrified. But then he felt a presence beside him. Clara was standing there. She had taken off her yellow gloves, holding them in her hands. Her hands were red from the heat of the rubber, shaking slightly. "I should go," she whispered. "I'm fired, right?" Julian looked at the doctor, who was now checking the readout with a stunned expression. "Julian," Dr. Evans said, his voice trembling with disbelief. She's trying to breathe on her own. The cortical activity just jumped 400%. This is medically impossible. It's a miracle." Julian looked back at Clara. He saw the way she looked at Lily, not with curiosity, but with a fierce, protective love that matched his own. He looked at the cheap jar of balm in his hand. "No," Julian said, his voice low. Clara looked up, surprised. "Sir?" "You're not fired," Julian said, his grey eyes locking onto hers. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate intensity. "You're not leaving this room. Whatever you did, whatever you are, you stay." "But the agency—" "Screw the agency," Julian snapped, though he didn't raise his voice. He stepped closer to her, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive scotch and fear. She smelled of rain and lavender. "I don't know who you are. I don't know why you're here. But you just did in 5 minutes what the best doctors in the world couldn't do in 3 years. He turned back to the bed where Lily was now letting out a soft, whimpering cry, a sound of life. "You're not the maid anymore," Julian declared, the authority returning to his voice, but softer this time. "From this moment on, you are her private caretaker, and you will do exactly what you just did again and again until she says my name." Clara swallowed hard. She clutched her gloves. She knew she should run. Getting involved with a billionaire, becoming the center of attention, was dangerous for a woman trying to stay hidden. But she looked at the little girl fighting to wake up. "I'll stay," Clara whispered. Julian nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Good, now tell me, what is that song?" Before Clara could answer, Dr. Evans called out, "Mr. Thorne, she's opening her eyes." The world stopped. Julian rushed to the bedside, falling to his knees. Clara stayed back in the shadows, watching as the blue eyes of the little girl fluttered open, unfocused and confused, reflecting the sterile lights of the room. Julian wept openly, burying his face in the sheets. Clara watched him, a single tear rolling down her own cheek. She knew this was just the beginning. She had woken the sleeping beauty, but she had also woken the dragon. And she had a feeling that the secrets she was hiding were about to become very difficult to keep. She looked down at her hands. The tingling sensation was still there. It wasn't just the balm. She knew it, and she was terrified that soon he would know it too. End of Part 2. The Connection. 3 weeks had passed since the miracle, and the atmosphere in the Thorne mansion had shifted from a mausoleum to something resembling a home, albeit a fragile one. The sterile silence of the medical wing was now frequently broken by the sound of humming. Clara knelt beside the bed, her yellow gloves discarded on the side table. She held a bowl of warm broth. Lily was propped up by pillows, her blue eyes open but still distant. The physical recovery was slow. Muscles atrophied from 3 years of stillness didn't rebuild overnight, but the mental awakening was happening in bursts. "Just one more spoon, pequeña," Clara whispered, her voice a soothing melody. She didn't treat Lily like a patient. She treated her like a conspirator in a secret game. "If you eat this, I'll tell you the story about the moon and the ocean again." Lily's mouth opened slightly. She took the broth. It was a small victory, but to Julian, watching from the doorway, it looked like a monumental triumph. Julian had stopped going to the office. He had moved his command center to the library adjacent to the medical wing. He told himself it was to monitor the doctors, but in truth, he was monitoring Clara. He was fascinated by her. She moved with a grace that belonged in a ballroom, not a sick room. She wore the same simple uniform, but the way she pinned her hair back, revealing the curve of her neck, distracted him more than he cared to admit. He walked in. Clara stiffened slightly, sensing his presence. The dynamic between them was charged with an unspoken electricity, gratitude mixed with confusion, and something deeper, hotter, that both were afraid to name. "Doctor, Evans says her reflex response is up another 10%, Julian said, his voice softer than the harsh baritone he used with his employees. He walked to the other side of the bed. "She's strong," Clara said, wiping Lily's mouth with a cloth. "She listens. Don't you, Lily?" For the first time in 3 years, Lily turned her head voluntarily. She looked at Julian. Her lips moved. No sound came out, but the shape was unmistakable. "Daddy." Julian's breath hitched. He reached out, his hand trembling, and covered Lily's small hand. "I'm here, baby. I'm right here." He looked up at Clara. Her eyes were shining with tears. In that moment, the barrier of class, the billionaire and the maid, evaporated. They were just two adults united by the love for this child. "How do you do it?" Julian asked, his voice thick with emotion. "The doctors have charts and drugs. You have... what? Humming and lavender?" "Love isn't scientific, Mr. Thorne," Clara replied softly. "Medicine keeps the body alive, but you need a reason to come back. I just gave her a reason." Julian walked around the bed. He was close to her now, too close. He could smell the faint scent of rain and herbs that always clung to her. "Stop calling me Mr. Thorne. It's Julian." Clara looked down, her lashes casting shadows on her cheeks. "I don't think that's appropriate, sir." "I don't care about propriety," Julian said intensely. He reached out, his fingers brushing against her arm, the same arm he had bruised weeks ago. "I care that you saved my life, because if she had died, I would have died too." The air in the room grew heavy, suffocatingly intimate. Clara looked up, her lips parting slightly. Julian leaned in, drawn by a magnetic force he couldn't control. He saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the loneliness that mirrored his own. "Julian!" The sharp, high-pitched voice shattered the moment like glass. Julian pulled back, blinking as if waking from a trance. Clara stepped back quickly, grabbing the tray of food, her face flushing crimson. Standing in the doorway was a woman who looked like she had just stepped off a runway in Milan. Vanessa, Julian's fiancée, stood clad in a red designer dress that clashed violently with the soft blue tones of the room. Her blonde hair was coiffed to perfection, her makeup flawless, and her eyes were narrowing as she surveyed the scene. "Vanessa," Julian said, his voice dropping to a flat, guarded tone. "You're back early from Paris." "Clearly," Vanessa said, stepping into the room. Her heels clicked loudly on the tile, an aggressive sound. She walked past Clara as if she were a piece of furniture, not even acknowledging her existence. She went straight to Julian and kissed him on the cheek, leaving a smear of red lipstick. "I heard the news, the miracle. I flew back immediately." She looked down at Lily with an expression that feigned delight, but didn't reach her cold eyes. "Oh, look at her! She looks better." Vanessa reached out to touch Lily's hair with a manicured hand. Lily flinched. The little girl let out a distress noise, a sharp whine, and turned her head away, reaching her hand out toward Clara. Vanessa froze, her hand hovering in the air. The rejection was palpable. She turned slowly to look at the maid. "Why is she reaching for the help?" Vanessa asked, her voice tight. "Clara is her caretaker," Julian said, stepping between them. "She's the reason Lily is awake." Vanessa laughed, a brittle, tinkling sound. "The maid? Julian, darling, don't be ridiculous. It was the experimental treatment Dr. Evans started last month. I read the reports." She turned her gaze on Clara, scanning her from her sensible shoes to her uniform. "You can go now. I'll sit with my future stepdaughter." Clara hesitated. She looked at Lily, who was beginning to hyperventilate, the monitors beeping faster. "I think she needs to rest, Miss Vanessa," Clara said quietly but firmly. "Too much stimulation is bad for her." Vanessa's eyes flashed. "Excuse me? Are you giving me orders in my fiancé's house?" "She's right," Julian cut in. "Vanessa, let's go. Let Clara do her job." Vanessa looked between Julian and Clara. She was a predator who had sensed a threat. She saw the way Julian had been standing close to the maid. She saw the way the child preferred the servant, jealousy, hot and toxic, coiled in her stomach. "Fine," Vanessa said, smoothing her dress. "We have a dinner to attend anyway. The gala. You haven't forgotten, have you, Julian?" Julian had forgotten. He looked at Clara one last time. "Take care of her." "Always," Clara whispered. As Julian led Vanessa out, Vanessa glanced back over her shoulder. Her look promised war. She wasn't going to let a cleaning girl with yellow gloves steal her billionaire and the lifestyle that came with him. The betrayal. The following week was a battlefield masked as a luxury household. Vanessa had moved into the mansion ostensibly to help with Lily, but in reality to mark her territory. She was everywhere, criticizing the kitchen staff, reordering the living room furniture, and constantly hovering in the medical wing, making snide comments about Clara's primitive methods. Clara tried to ignore it. Her focus was entirely on Lily. The little girl was making rapid progress. She could now sit up on her own and whisper single words. The bond between them was unbreakable. Lily would only eat if Clara fed her. She would only sleep if Clara hummed that specific song. But the tension came to a head on a stormy Thursday evening. Julian had been away all day at meetings, leaving Vanessa alone in the house. When he returned, exhausted, the atmosphere in the mansion was brittle. He found Vanessa in the library, sobbing theatrically into a handkerchief, while Dr. Evans stood by looking uncomfortable. "What happened?" Julian asked, loosening his tie. "It's gone, Julian," Vanessa wailed. "My diamond tennis bracelet, the vintage one your mother gave me for the engagement. I left it on the side table in the medical room because I was afraid it would scratch Lily while I was reading to her. I went to the bathroom, and when I came back, gone." Julian frowned. "Are you sure you didn't misplace it?" "I know where I put it," she snapped, then softened her voice. "There was only one other person in that room, Julian. The maid." "Clara?" Julian shook his head immediately. "No, she wouldn't." "Wouldn't she?" Vanessa stood up, her eyes gleaming with malice. "She's a nobody, Julian. We don't know where she came from. She has no references. I did some digging. Did you know she was fired from her last job at a hospital for unauthorized behavior?" "That doesn't make her a thief," Julian argued, though a seed of doubt was planted. "Just search her bag," Vanessa pleaded, grabbing his hands. "If I'm wrong, I'll apologize, but that bracelet is a family heirloom, please." Julian rubbed his temples. "Fine, let's get this over with so you can stop crying." They marched to the staff quarters. Clara was in the small kitchen, boiling water for tea. She looked up startled as Julian, Vanessa, and the head of security entered. "Mr. Thorne?" Clara asked, sensing the shift in the air. "We need to check your bag, Clara," Julian said, his voice flat. He wouldn't look her in the eye. "My bag?" Clara frowned. "Why?" "Just give it to him," Vanessa screeched. Confused, Clara pointed to her worn tote bag on the chair. The security guard picked it up and dumped the contents onto the table. A spare uniform, a book, a wallet, and something that glittered under the kitchen lights. The diamond bracelet slid out from the folds of the spare uniform. The room went silent. Clara stared at the jewelry, her mouth falling open. I have never seen that before. I didn't take that." "Liar!" Vanessa hissed. "It was wrapped in your uniform. You were going to sneak it out tonight." Clara looked at Julian. "Sir, please. You know I wouldn't. I care about Lily, not your money. I've been here day and night saving her life." Julian looked at the bracelet, then at Clara. The evidence was right there, and the stress of the last few years, the fear that he was being manipulated, crashed down on him. He was a man of logic, and logic said she was guilty. Vanessa's poison about Clara's past unauthorized behavior stung. Was she manipulating him too? Was the connection he felt just a con? "Is it true?" Julian asked coldly. "Did you get fired from a hospital?" Clara hesitated. "Yes, but But what? You stole from them too, Vanessa interjected. No, I was fired because I refused to leave a dying patient alone when the protocol said move on, Clara cried, tears spilling over. I didn't steal this. I can't take the risk, Julian said. He felt like he was cutting out his own heart, but he hardened his expression. He couldn't have a thief around his vulnerable daughter. Pack your things. Julian, no, Clara whispered. Please, Lily needs me. She won't understand. Lily will be fine with professionals who don't steal, Vanessa said smugly. Get out, now, before we call the police. Clara looked at Julian one last time, searching for the man who had held her hand by the bedside. He was gone. In his place was the cold billionaire. Broken, Clara grabbed her bag. She didn't take the spare uniform. She didn't take her coat. She just walked out the back door into the pouring rain. The moment the door clicked shut, a clock began to tick. Upstairs in the medical room, Lily was sleeping. But as Clara walked further away from the mansion, walking down the long driveway in the mud, something in the room changed. The rhythm of the heart monitor stumbled, beep, 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 beep. Julian was pouring himself a drink in the library, trying to drown the guilt, when the scream tore through the house. It wasn't a scream of pain. It was a scream of terror. Dada! It was Lily's voice, loud, clear, frantic. Julian dropped the glass. It shattered on the floor. He ran. He sprinted up the stairs, taking them two at a time. Vanessa was running behind him, breathless. They burst into the medical room. The scene was chaos. Lily was thrashing in the bed, tearing at the sheets. Her eyes were wide open, dilated with panic. She was looking around the room, searching, hunting. "Where is she?" Lily screamed, her voice raspy but powerful. "Where is Mama Clara?" "Lily, baby, calm down." Julian tried to grab her, but she fought him with surprising strength. "No!" Lily shrieked. She pointed a trembling finger at the door. "Bring her back. The dark is coming back. Bring her back." Suddenly, the monitors went red. High-pitched alarms began to wail. "Her heart rate is spiking to 180. Dr. Evans yelled, rushing to the IV stand. "She's going into cardiac distress. She's panicking." "Do something!" Vanessa yelled. "Sedate her!" "No!" Julian shouted, pushing Vanessa back. He looked at his daughter. She was gasping for air, tears streaming down her face, reaching out for a hand that wasn't there. She sang," Lily gasped, her face turning blue. "The song stopped. Daddy, I'm falling." Her eyes rolled back. The frantic beeping turned into a singular, long, terrifying tone. Beep! "She's crashing!" Evans screamed. "Code Blue! Get the crash cart!" Julian stood frozen in the center of the room. The realization hit him with the force of a freight train. The bracelet, the timing, Clara's plea. It was all a lie. Vanessa had orchestrated it, and in his stupidity, he had sent away the only anchor keeping his daughter tethered to this world. He turned to Vanessa, who looked pale, realizing her game had gone too far. "You," Julian growled, a sound so guttural it didn't sound human. "You did this." "Julian, Get out," Julian said, his voice deadly calm amidst the chaos of the resuscitation efforts behind him. "Get out of my house. If my daughter dies, I will spend every penny I have to destroy you." He didn't wait for her to leave. He spun around and ran. He ran out of the room, down the stairs, and burst out the front door into the storm. He didn't care about his suit. He didn't care about the lightning. He jumped into his sports car, tires screeching as he peeled out of the driveway. He had to find her. He had to find Clara before the silence took Lily forever. The redemption. The Aston Martin tore through the darkness, hydroplaning over the flooded asphalt. The storm had turned into a deluge, the rain slashing against the windshield like shrapnel. Julian's knuckles were white on the leather steering wheel, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm that matched the terrifying speed of the car. He had the phone on speaker in the passenger seat. Evan's voice was cutting in and out through the static of the storm. "Julian, pulses thready, oxygen levels dropping below 70. She's giving up. We can't stabilize. Keep her alive!" Julian screamed at the dashboard, tears blurring his vision. "Do not let her go, Evans. I'm bringing her back. I'm bringing the life back." He hung up, swerving around a fallen branch. He knew where Clara would go. There was only one bus station that ran late-night routes out of the city, a dilapidated shelter 5 miles from the estate. He spotted the station through the sheets of rain. It was a miserable concrete block, illuminated by a flickering yellow streetlight. And there, sitting on the metal bench, huddled under her thin coat, was a small figure. Julian slammed on the brakes. The car skidded, tires screeching on the wet road, coming to a halt just inches from the curb. He didn't bother with an umbrella. He threw the door open and sprinted into the rain. Clara, the figure on the bench, jumped, clutching her bag to her chest. She looked up, her hair plastered to her face, shivering violently. When she saw him, soaking wet, wild-eyed, looking nothing like the composed billionaire she knew, she stood up, backing away. "Stay away from me," she yelled over the roar of the thunder. "I didn't take it, I swear." "I know," Julian shouted, closing the distance. He fell to his knees right there on the dirty pavement, oblivious to the mud soaking his tailored trousers. "I know you didn't take it. It was a lie. Vanessa planted it." Clara stared at him, stunned. "Then why are you here?" "Because I was a fool," Julian choked out, the rain mixing with the tears on his face. He reached out a hand, palm up, begging. "I let my fear blind me. I let a stranger dictate my trust, but Clara, Lily knows who loves her." At the mention of the name, Clara's defiance crumbled. "Lily!" "She's dying," Julian whispered, the words tearing his throat. "The moment you left, she started to scream. She panicked. Her heart is failing. She's looking for you, Clara. She's looking for her mother." Clara dropped her bag. The anger vanished, replaced instantly by terror. "Is she—" "She's holding on, but barely. Evans says she's fading. She needs the anchor. She needs you." Julian looked up at her, his grey eyes pleading. "I can't save her with money. I can't save her with doctors. Only you can save her, please. I will spend the rest of my life making it up to you, but please, get in the car." Clara didn't hesitate for another second. She didn't ask for a raise. She didn't ask for an apology. She ran past him and jumped into the passenger seat of the sports car. Julian scrambled up and vaulted into the driver's seat. He floored the gas pedal before the door was even fully closed. The drive back was a blur of speed and silence. Clara sat with her eyes closed, her hands pressed together in prayer, her lips moving silently. Julian drove with the precision of a race car driver, taking corners at dangerous speeds, fueled by adrenaline. "She woke up screaming your name," Julian said, breaking the silence, his voice rough. "She called you Mama Clara." Clara opened her eyes, a fresh wave of tears spilling over. "I love her, Julian. I never wanted to take your place. I just wanted her to know she wasn't alone. You didn't take my place," Julian said, reaching over to grip her hand for a brief second. "You filled a space that has been empty for 3 years." They screeched through the iron gates of the mansion, spraying gravel. The front door was already open. Mrs. Higgins was standing there, weeping. Julian and Clara didn't stop. They ran through the grand foyer, up the marble staircase, their wet shoes squeaking on the polished floors. They could hear the alarms before they even reached the hallway, the constant droning whine of the critical failure alert. "Beep!" "Clear!" Dr. Evans' voice shouted. Thump! The sound of the defibrillator. Clara gasped, sprinting faster. She burst into the room. The scene was a nightmare. Lily's small body jumped on the bed as the electricity hit her. The doctors were frantic. The flat line on the monitor remained a stubborn, straight green line. "Charge to 200!" Evans yelled. "Again!" "Stop!" Clara's voice wasn't loud, but it carried a power that cut through the panic. She pushed past a nurse, knocking over a tray of instruments. "Get away from her," Clara commanded, shoving Dr. Evans back. "She's flatlining," Evans shouted. "We need to shock her." "You're hurting her," Clara cried. She threw herself onto the bed, not checking for a pulse, not looking at the machines. She scooped Lily's limp body into her arms, pulling the child against her wet coat. The room went silent, save for the drone of the flatline. The medical team watched in shock. Julian stood at the foot of the bed, his heart stopped in his chest. Clara rocked the child. She buried her face in Lily's neck. She ignored the coldness of the skin. She poured every ounce of her own warmth, her own life force, into the little girl. "I'm here," Clara sobbed into Lily's ear. "I'm here, my sweet girl. The bad lady is gone. I'm not leaving. I promise. I will never leave you again." She took a deep breath, and through her tears she began to hum. It was shaky at first, broken by sobs, but it grew stronger. The same lullaby, the song of the stars and the morning. "Sleep, little star, the night is long." Julian watched the monitor. The line was flat. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. "Clara," Dr. Evans whispered, stepping forward with a syringe. "It's too late." "No," Julian barked, holding up a hand to stop the doctor. "Wait." Clara continued to sing, rocking back and forth. She moved her hand to Lily's chest, right over the silent heart. "But the morning brings the golden song." She kissed Lily's forehead. "Come back to me. Come back to Daddy. We are here." A glitch on the screen, a single jagged peak in the green line. Then another. Beep. The sound was faint, but in the silent room it sounded like a cannon blast. Beep! Beep! Dr. Evans gasped, spinning around to check the leads. "Sinus rhythm. She's back." The rhythm strengthened. "Beep! Beep! Beep! Beep!" Lily gasped, a huge, shuddering intake of air, as if she were emerging from deep water. Her eyes flew open. They weren't hazy this time. They were bright, terrified, and alive. She looked up and saw Clara. The terror vanished instantly. Her little arms, weak and trembling, reached up and wrapped around Clara's neck. "Mama," Lily croaked. "I've got you," Clara wept, kissing her cheeks, her hair, her hands. "I've got you." Julian walked to the side of the bed. His legs gave out, and he collapsed onto the mattress next to them. He wrapped his massive arms around both of them, the maid and his daughter, burying his face in Clara's wet shoulder. For a long time, the only sound in the room was the steady, strong beat of the heart monitor and the weeping of 3 people who had finally found their home. 6 months later, the sun was setting over the Thorne estate, bathing the gardens in a warm, golden light. The gloom that had hung over the mansion for years had completely lifted. The windows were open, letting in the breeze. On the patio, a tea party was in progress. Lily, now 7, sat in a chair. She was thin, but her cheeks were rosy. She wore a pink dress and was currently laughing as she tried to teach a golden retriever puppy how to sit. There were no tubes, no monitors, just a little girl playing. Julian sat at the patio table watching her. He looked younger. The lines of stress had smoothed out from his forehead. He held a tablet, but he wasn't reading it. He was watching the woman pouring tea. Clara was no longer wearing a uniform. She wore a simple, elegant sundress of pale yellow that matched the gloves she used to wear, a playful nod she and Julian laughed about now. "She walks a little better every day," Clara said, sitting down opposite him. "The physical therapy is working wonders." "She has a good coach," Julian smiled, reaching across the table to take her hand. He ran his thumb over her knuckles. "I received a letter today from Vanessa's lawyers." Clara stiffened slightly. "Oh? She wants a settlement," Julian chuckled darkly. "She's not getting a dime. In fact, after the police found the security footage of her planting the bracelet, she's lucky she isn't in prison. I made sure she is persona non grata in this city. She won't bother us again." "I don't care about her," Clara said honestly. "I just care that she's gone." "She is history," Julian promised. He squeezed her hand. "But we need to talk about the future." Clara looked at him, her heart beating faster. The future. I fired the maid, Julian said softly, his eyes twinkling. Technically, you've been unemployed for 6 months. You're just living here. I'm Lily's caretaker, Clara smiled. Lily doesn't need a caretaker anymore. She has a father. And she has... Julian paused, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small velvet box. She needs a mother. A real one. Clara stopped breathing. She looked at the box, then at Julian. I fell in love with you when you were on your knees washing my floor, Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. I fell deeper when you stood up to me to protect her. You are the heart of this house, Clara. Marry me, not to be the mother of my child, but to be the love of my life. Clara looked over at Lily, who was giggling as the puppy licked her face. She looked back at the man who had driven through a hurricane to find her. I didn't bring my gloves, she whispered, a tear sliding down her cheek. You won't need them, Julian smiled, opening the box to reveal a diamond that shone brighter than the one Vanessa had lost, but with a warmth that stone had never possessed. No more barriers. Just skin to skin, heart to heart. Clara nodded, unable to speak. She leaned across the table and Julian met her halfway. As they kissed, the sun dipped below the horizon, ending the long night that had lasted 3 years and welcoming the morning song. Lily looked up from her puppy, saw them kissing, and smiled. She began to hum, soft and low, the tune that had saved her life. The end,